Crisis Mapper specifically is set up for people like ourselves that know how to use these kind of tools, and you have to sign up, and you have to tell them what kind of skill set that you have, because they don't just let anybody use it. And then people that are involved in that, like this guy that set up this thing with the aerial photography for the Philippines, is a member of that group, but he did that, set up the site on his own, I guess with some help from various agencies, because how would he get the aerial photography? But they also will, like if there's a problem, they send out a blast email, like say, you know, they need 15 people with a GeoXH and, you know, antennas to show up, and, you know, people will come from all over the place to go there. That's more of the kind of thing, like Haiti with the earthquake. I know there was a lot of people on the East Coast that went down to Haiti with various types of GPS equipment. And then, like I said, they do have these online things, but you need to sign up with them first. They don't just, like, you know, have anybody, you know, somebody sitting at home who's not going to get an email from them and go on their site. But they do a lot of good stuff all throughout, you know, even for droughts or whatever. I mean, anytime there's a major emergency. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, it just struck me when Hurricane Irene hit the upstate area. A lot of the bridges were washed out, and there was no place to go to really see the pictures and see what bridges and, you know, how to get from one place to the other. Where we're using tools like Crisis Mapper in places like Haiti to track the cholera outbreaks and some of the other stuff, and yet we don't have a tool that does a similar thing during a crisis in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
well, I know
kind of interesting in the sense that,
yeah, like,
you know, until DOT reports a road closes, it's hard to know that the bridge is actually gone, where somebody could take a picture of that bridge that's gone, and with a mobile app, pretty quickly put it up so that, you know, the neighbors and people can see what's going on.
yeah, that is something that should definitely be done, especially, you know, New York, New Jersey. There should be, you know, I mean, I have, you know, Elijah's Long Island GIS, which I'm the chairman of on Long Island, and we have a group of people, you know, and I know I can contact if something happens. And I know a lot of them, you know, after 9/11 too, where, you know, we'll went into the city, to the pier to help out. But I'm not sure that, like some of these other communities, like the smaller upstate communities where they had all that flooding, I don't know that anybody in that town even knew who to, you know, that they could call somebody.
Well, I'm thinking a mobile app, a lot of people
Yeah.
still have their phones working,
Yeah.
and they could have reported it, and other people could have seen
I'm not
it.
sure that, you know, like I said, that information's getting out. Like I know in the you know, bigger areas, the cities, you know, anybody that's involved up here with, you know, the parks and everything, they know, but maybe some places they just don't get that information, that there is this resource, you know, that they can use. And that's something that, you know, we probably need to fix.
I had a question for Jennifer. With regard to the invasive species, once you found that there's an incidence of something like the emerald ash borer, is there any corresponding data, like you know, vulnerable populations for, you know, where are the ash trees in the area, or, you know, where could this spread? Is there any sort of corresponding data that you have up for that, or links to somebody who might be looking into that kind of information?
Right, well, I guess that's where we work really closely with our partners, like with the example for emerald ash borer, the beetle that Brent mentioned that attacks ash trees. As soon as somebody puts in a point, say for, or a suspected emerald ash borer finding, then we have these special administrative alerts that go to state agency, the state agency divisions that, you know, follow up directly with that. And so when that they get that alert, and they can automatically contact the person who submitted it, and they also have the like host tree data coverage for the state, so they'll know where the different ash tree populations are. And so it's this communication chain that we rely on. So we're not necessarily supplying like the next step, like the management steps or something for those particular infestations, but we're making sure
spread out the snakeheads in the state of New York?
It's a good question. I know that it's, has been, I think there's a few populations that are established on Long Island. And there's been a couple that have been reported upstate.
How far north do they?
We could pull it up.
We could see, well, the main population that pops in my head that's upstate was in, I believe, Orange County. And they believe that it's intentionally stocked. It's actually a culinary fish for some cultures, and so it's stocked intentionally, brought over from its native range and stocked as water bodies so that they have a continuous source of that species, but it doesn't stay contained. So when it did pop up above Long Island, New York City, then DEC did do a huge eradication effort, and actually it seems like, I think it's been 3 to 5 years now that one water body that was upstate that they worked on, and so far they have not seen that snakehead population again. But the cities, or the water bodies where it's actively found are Long Island, New York City.
I was wondering if any of you have given any consideration to having the crowd unwittingly source your data. So I suppose that with finite basins that wouldn't work so well. You really need to be educated. But I'm thinking of situations like Google traffic, where the traffic is crowdsourced by the community out there on the roads driving, and their phones are, it's tracking the speed of its phones moving, therefore I know it's slower here, it's faster here. And I'm wondering if things like that could be used with Sequent Fix, or with looking at where there are major pileups, or everybody's going around an area in Huntington County, Huntington Town, Huntington, for instance, because they can't get by, there's a tree down across the road, or if we're using just vehicle navigations and things like that for populating OpenStreetMap, and therefore feeding, New York City's data. Is this something that you really want the crowd to be intentionally doing it, or is it a kind of concept where you might actually have the crowd involuntarily sourcing
When do
it?
you invite the other stage to that?
The traffic thing is interesting because, I work for the highway department, so if there's a snowstorm that happens and it starts at midday on a Friday, it's gonna be a complete disaster. And we have a problem because, everybody's coming home from work, coming home from Manhattan, or even we have a big commercial area in Melville where there's a lot of big companies. Canon's got their world headquarters. There's a whole bunch of different places like that. So, that's very good because, now it's going to take our trucks a lot longer to get to where they need to go. So I'll even actually sometimes get on the radio and say, don't go down East Deer Park Road because it's just backed up all the way down to the expressway. And we do use that stuff. I mean, it's a very rudimentary way of, just looking at it on the screen, get on the radio or the phone, and just tell them, don't go, try and use a different route to get back.
Right.
Because we have a place where we have the sand salt, and, they need to get to that spot. So save them a lot of time.
Yeah, I bring up the Google traffic specifically also because in our situation at the Thruway Authority, we put a system in place to measure traffic speeds on certain links on the highway. And that was doing a good job of collecting the data and showing us where slowdowns were. But then when Google came out with the traffic that's being monitored by everybody driving down the road, also we're like, wow, that's a lot better than what we could put together in-house. So if you go to our public website and you turn on traffic conditions, it's sourcing that data from Google. Because it was a better source, it was actually a better way to put the data out there, was just to use the crowd to get it, instead of our own systems that we're intentionally trying to put out there, and we're costing a lot more money and we're getting the same quality of data.
And do you then do you analyze that data?
Well, we can see, there's a slowdown here, we figure out what's going on. But most of the time, we know what's going on the road anyway. Somebody's reported it, and we'd send a dispatch, a dispatch would send policemen out there to investigate what's going on. But it's certainly an interesting way, especially more for our customers, to see what's going on than for us.
So, Eric, a follow-up question since you're in the transportation. So how does Garmin do it? The Garmin has the traffic stuff in it. I mean, is that Garmin devices feeding into?
Yeah, I believe it's the same thing. I don't know 100%, but I believe it works the exact same way. It's those devices are all, everybody who's got, the devices is feeding their information up to to the main mothership, and it's coming down and then to everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting, from right after Sandy, we need to investigate all of the buildings to see people that are essentially infirmed, shut in. So, you know, the city had to canvass all of the buildings that were knocked out. And with limited staffing, with limited resources, we need to prioritize which buildings, which structures we went to first. So our data analytics folks looked at, you know, when power came back online, they looked at the SCADA systems showing where water was going and where water wasn't going, looked at where, you know, buildings that were not getting power, and so to sort of, from a risk perspective, which one showed a higher probability of having people in those that are not, you know, being not accessible. Because these people probably didn't have phones, even if the phones were working, they may or may not have had service, you know. So we used it as a way of prioritizing which structures to go to first.
Other questions?
Just kind of a random question. Where does one store, like, where does one store 19,000 truckloads of vegetative fruit?
That actually, in the middle of December, became a very big issue, because we were pulling about 12,000 cubic yards off the road every day, and then we only had 2 places to bring the debris to. But a bigger problem was what happened on the South Shore of Long Island, and I'm sure in New York City and New Jersey, because we just had tree debris. They had tree debris, construction, demolition, C&D. They had whites, which is air conditioners, refrigerators. So I have actually video from my friend of mine that was working down by Long Beach, and they would just dump all the stuff. Actually, there was a bunch of houses that were knocked down, so they leveled all the rest of the houses and dumped all the stuff there. And they had these knuckle boom trucks just picking the different and separating it out and then put it on barges. Some of it came up to Albany, to a landfill, but that was just a gigantic undertaking. And then debris is a big problem, and that's going to be a big problem going forward even too, because some of the places they just can't handle. You know, Long Island's pretty, where I am is, there's, you know, 93 square miles is 210,000 people, so it's not a lot of open property where you can put stuff. So it's a big deal. That's something that I think they're going to be, I know that there's already groups of people in government that are looking at that going forward. You know, they tried doing the burning thing, but, you know, there's, people are not, they weren't happy about that. They weren't happy. Of course not. No, they were not happy. That actually got stopped. They're not, I think they passed a local law, you can't even do that anymore. So, it's the perfect thing to do with it.
Colin, I think you were the one that mentioned something about new people coming in and overwriting existing data. How do you handle that kind of thing in general? I mean, you've got your own, you go out and verify this and say, okay, well, what do you do with situations like that?
Well, I mean, when I mentioned that, that was more in reference to OSM. That was content that had already been added to OSM. When we provided our data, they were very touchy about overriding content that had already been provided, right? From our perspective, when we get an update, we're going to validate the information before we, enter it into our database.
Right.
We don't have field,
You have a very separate database eventually. You're sharing data between the 2 entities, but really you're maintaining 2 completely separate databases.
Well, we're maintaining one, they're maintaining the other,
Right.
and so the intention is to have bidirectional communication, so at some point in time, they will be close to being in sync.
Okay.
But yeah, 2 different update streams.
So how does that feed into what, say, Bing Maps or Google Maps does? I mean, are they pulling their data from you to update their maps at the same time, or don't you know?
I mean, Google probably has, force of 1,000. When they do, Street View, they also have cameras on there that, that are taking pictures of addresses, street signs, so that's how they, build up the repository of their database. I'm sure Bing is doing something very similar. But no, they could be downloading our data from our open data portal. I have no idea.
Okay, so there's not really a licensing issue with.
We have no licensing anymore. I mean, the local law city of New York basically said, you know, unless it's sort of a security concern, the data is out there, it's freely available, there are no strict restrictions on its usage, so if a, you know, commercial entity wanted to come in, repackage, add some an additional value to it and turn around and sell it, that's fair game, you know?
An interesting thing about your question is, one of the main things that pushed the OpenStreetMap community over the last couple of years was that Google Maps, it used to be free, their API, but they started charging a lot of money if you had over a certain amount of usage. So a lot of companies said, well, the heck with that, we'll use OSN to do everything. And Google then was, oh, no, wait, we made a mistake, we're sorry, you know, because their money stream is going to go away. But, you know, that really pushed the community big time with the open source stuff a few years ago.
I have a question, it's probably more directed towards Jeff. I was wondering if you find with C-Click-Fix that it's a kind of an even distribution of where people report. Do you naturally get more reports in areas that are denser, or do you get more reports where you have 2 or 3 people who are just using this all the time and reporting 50 issues each? You know, where do you get your pockets of use?
Well, it's tough to say because where there's denser, there's more people, and so the volume's higher, so it kind of feeds off itself. It does tend to be in urban settings that people are really active on it when they do that. One city I showed the Malden, Massachusetts example on there where the mayor actually reported it. It's interesting, where you have elected officials that have really adopted the platform, the usage is really high. So if elected officials are using it a lot, then the residents are too. If city staff aren't using it as much, there's still going to be a user base. I think everyone who adopts C-Click-Fix initially, if I was to ask them, give me the names of the top 10 request submitters, they would know who they are off the top of their head. But the idea is to broaden the audience that are participating that aren't sending things previously. The volume of requests might be a little higher in the long run, but overall what you're really doing is just, there's so many potholes out there. You're just expanding the group of people that are actually sending something in and being alerted when something gets done. So that's really kind of the idea.
Yeah, and for the city's 311 system, we're not using a C-Click-Fix, but we did an analysis of where the calls were coming in, you know, many years ago. And there's a strong correlation between, you know, economic affluence and where, you know, the calls were coming in from, right? So you saw less affluent areas or immigrant communities completely underrepresented within, you know, the call stream. So there was a big outreach program with campaign messages in the different languages, outreach there to get people to understand that calling 311 is not like calling 911. If you make a complaint, they're not, you know, INS is not going to show up and deport you, right? So there was a big outreach. But what we've seen, you know, over the years, there's been a few high water marks, like the transit strike in New York City. You know, there was an uptick in calls, and there's never that downtick. Once people are comfortable, they're like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. Let me call again, right? You know, and you get Sandy and so on and so forth. So you get these, and it never drops back down. It sort of levels off, and then it just goes up from there. So, you know, we've seen penetration. Yeah, I'm sure you see something similar.
Yeah, the same thing. And I think as you see the demographic groups adoption of mobile applications, and like in Hartford, for example, there are some areas where they may not have a computer at home, but they do have a mobile application that they have. So sometimes districts, counselors are really trying to engage their demographic to use the mobile app because it's the tool they have. And so it kind of fits for different groups.
You know, along the mobile app lines, I was really surprised. I think, Jennifer, you had this slide up that was talking about a number of reports that had come in from various locations. And I was really surprised that the smallest was mobile.
Right, right.
I would have expected that to be one of the highest. Is that because it's new and it's just more recently out there? Or I would expect as soon as you put something out on mobile, all of a sudden the numbers skyrocket because everybody's using it.
Right, right. And it is pretty new. We just launched that in the last year. And right now it's just the browser-based interface. So they actually have to have data connectivity.
Okay.
So
The issue is connectivity.
And that gets reported as I think, a web.
no, it's an actual, yeah. But once, like Brent was talking about this app package that's hopefully coming out this year, right? Or this next field season.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of adoption with that. I think it was just harder for people to you know, they're trying to take a picture and if they're relying on web connectivity, it's slow to upload, and, you know, there are just some growing issues with it.
And a lot of those invasives are likely to be in the areas where there's not good connectivity.
Right, right.
I think the other issue too is, if you look, we don't keep demographic information necessarily of our users, but I would take a guess just based on, you know, looking at the people attending our training, that a large percentage of our users are in the generation that hasn't adopted mobile technology yet, so.
Okay, well, it's very interesting, yeah, okay, that's a good point, because actually Jeff had the opposite situation, you said, with the mobile app, all of a sudden everything really works.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I always stress whenever I talk to people is like, phone calls are never gonna go away to municipalities. There's an audience that it is the primary tool, it's always gonna be there. This is just extends the different ways people can communicate with the city as well as the city can communicate back to them. So it's just another channel.
But it's a lot cheaper channel because we've analyzed it, and that the amount it costs for the city to handle a call coming in is, you know, 100 times the cost it is for something coming over the web. So we've tried to direct traffic to the web, you know, and we use Cha-Cha, which is a text service where it's like a FAQ section where you can type in certain common questions and it'll send you a text message back, but you know, people still prefer to call in quite often. I've never seen the demographic breakdown. I would imagine people calling in are probably of the older set and the younger set.
Right. But it is, yeah, like you said, it's expensive to take a phone call.
Oh, yeah.
Staff there, and
It's huge.
yeah.
It's really expensive.
Any other questions? Any questions the panel members have for each other, or?
Yes, is bamboo an invasive species?
Oh,
Because
well,
my neighbor's bamboo is take over the world in about a day or
I
so.
think both in Nassau and Suffolk County, it's,
Our
there's been
town-
I don't
Our
know.
municipalities.
town just
Wow,
passed
so
an
please.
ordinance against it, yeah.
Right.
You have to contain it on your property.
Okay.
And New York State just put a draft list of